Welcome. Our first talk of our STEM-4-U. Today is going to be STEAM because one of the ideas of the group is to support the STEM interest on all students. Right. So science is, everybody has curiosity, want to learn things, and there's difference that you can do pure science, but also you can do interdisciplinary things, like need, and that's what the talk's going to be today. So we want to support underrepresented minorities in STEM, which typically females across the board are usually underrepresented, and then within that there are also other minority groups. So we want to support your interest in STEM and also our students on campus in STEM. So Kathy's our first speaker, and she's the curator of the museum and the planetarium. And thank you so much for being our first speaker. And this is being recorded, and we will be then posting it on our website, which right now is located under the museum website. So you can find there. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
So hello, I am Kathy. I have been in the museum and art world for about 30 years. I came here from Pittsburgh, where I worked at the Carnegie Museum System for a long time. And when I came here, the museum wasn't even really open to the public. I came here about 7 years ago to ESU. And so my job was kind of to, build a museum. How do you open a museum for the first time? So it wasn't just how do you run an admissions desk. It was also how do you build all these programs? How do you write tours? How do you have 100 screaming third graders come in and give them a tour? So those are all the kinds of things that we do at the museum. But one of my passions is really STEAM. It's not just that I love science, but I also love all the interdisciplinary things that go with science. I am married to a scientific illustrator. I started out as a technical writer. So I've always been very interested in how science blends with other arts and humanities type disciplines. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. So the question is, what is STEAM? Most people know it's science, technology, engineering, and math. The A does not stand for and. The A stands for arts. And this kind of came up in 2006 as a proposed interdisciplinary model. The problem was and still is, that the US is behind the rest of the world when it comes to STEM disciplines and STEM progress, STEM careers. Anything STEM, we're really behind. And so the idea was, the people who proposed it thought that you could take the logic and the thought processes of the sciences and blend that with the creative thinking, not the art part, like actually the skills of it, but they were thinking the creative part. If we looked at problems the way an artist would, if we looked at problems the way a dancer would we find out of the box solutions for things in ways that we weren't already thinking of? Later, it came to also include art. So there is a little bit of confusion about what the A stands for, but in general, it really means creativity and applying creative thinking to the sciences. And not to get too classroomy, but just to give you kind of the environment that we're talking about here, there's something called the learning ecosystem, which is how everybody learns. It's not that it's just you and you sit in a classroom. 95% of learning occurs throughout your lifetime outside of the classroom. And these are all the influences that can affect what you learn and how you learn and what your interests are. So that little blue dot in the middle is supposed to be you. And that first ring are the people closest to you. The second ring are things that you're involved in. And the third are more of the cultural or national or other influences that can hit upon you. What is most important to you, depends on your background, depends on your interests. But these are all the influences that factor in. And those are the kinds of things that were not being included in this STEM ecosystem. It was very much when we were pushing to be, leaders in the world in science, that it was science, science, science. And none of these other influences were being factored in to the educational system. And so that's what they're trying to change now. A lot of research that's coming out is that it's a complex system. It is work, it's people, it's culture, it's the old people, it's the young people, it's people working together, it's learning from each other. And all of those things factor together. The goal is to have an integrated system. It's not that you're just a scientist and then you go home and you have your regular life. Your life can be mixed in with what you do when you're involved in science, and vice versa. So what I'm going to go through are some of the different ways that STEAM blends science and different things, whether that's art or science or writing or whatever. And the benefits of this are that it's interdisciplinary. There are endless combinations. It is only limited by what you're interested in. You can blend science with anything, and you can blend anything with science. That's what's really great about it. And that is what in the rest of the world they have been doing all these years. And that's why they are a lot more successful, because they're not separating science from regular everyday life and people's interests and skills and abilities and talents. The novelty is great because there's always new technology and there's always new media coming out. So the options are always changing, and there are always new things you can do. Even if you've done a certain thing for a long, long time in STEM or STEAM, something new comes along and there you've got a whole new avenue you can explore, whether that's, you know, a hobby or something you're interested in, or actually a career. And the other thing is that arts, just like when it first started in 2006, the arts was just supposed to be creativity and creative thinking. It actually can mean art if that's what you're interested in. So it's very flexible, just how you interpret art. Some people who have no artistic skill, that's fine, but they can be very creative thinkers. It works for them just as well as it works for an artist who's actually an artist. And as far as careers go, STEAM is one of the fastest growing job sectors. STEAM is now outpacing STEM, because STEM, again, is kind of, not that it's limited. I mean, if you're a fantastic engineer, great, go do that. But STEAM offers so many more options because you are blending all these other things. And before STEAM was really coming on the landscape, STEM was, again, pushing science, 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 and it was kind of cutting out all those people who are actually doing science. They're just doing it in a different way, or they're not the ones actually, you know, designing the rocket ships, but they're the ones, you know, painting the letters on the side or whatever. But there's always somebody who's also doing science. It may not necessarily be like the mainstream science that we think of. So when you were a child, you may have done some of these activities, whether it was a summer camp or whether it was pre-K. But if you ever did any of these, you were already doing STEAM. So these are some of the, I picked 4, again, there are a million combinations of what you can do in STEAM. I picked 4 of the biggest ones that are the fastest growing, but there are so many more out there. So we had the little scribble dinosaur, and then we've got scientific illustration. We have the little scribbled handwriting, and we have somebody can grow up to be a technical writer. We've got that little googly eye totem pole there. We can have somebody who grows up to be maybe an exhibit designer, or somebody who's in advocacy or talking about Indigenous peoples. That could be a lot of different things. And then we've got, you know, a very young Bill Nye the Science Guy over here. So these are just some of the careers that I picked out. But again, there are a ton out there. One of the top ones is graphics and visualization. That is one of the most in-demand STEAM fields right now. That's one of the top projections for future careers. So if you're in art, you're in luck. This picture was actually done by my husband, the scientific illustrator. One of the plus ones that I was going to talk about was we've got science and art. And so this is where you can maybe work in a museum. You can work in designing exhibits. He actually did this for the dinosaur exhibit at the Carnegie Museum where we used to work. You might need programs, materials. So you've got, you know, the handouts, the flyers, the activity sheets, any of that stuff you could use these drawings for. Marketing, that's what draws people in to see your exhibits or see your programs or come to your school or whatever it might be. Retail, there's actually the husband of somebody who works here actually designs packaging and like socks and things. It's a really cool job because it's like, you know, how do you design a box to be really cool when somebody opens it? And it's just as cool as the thing that's inside it. And he designed socks at one point. So he was designing the weave in the socks so that they had all kinds of cool patterns on them. So when it comes to retail, there's that idea of, it's not even just a plus one. It's, you know, you're an artist and you're a designer and you like doing retail or you like designing products. So you can have a lot. It doesn't have to be plus one. It can be plus two, plus three, depending on what your interests are. And then, of course, there are books. There are plenty of wonderful books out there that have beautiful illustrations. And so if you're someone who likes to do that type of communication, that's a place where science and art can come together for you. Another version is research and art. So this is a little bit more of like the hard science, interpreting the hard science. Scientific journals are very big for this. This drawing, again, my husband, but it's taking the images and then simplifying them so that when you do a publication or you do an exhibit or you do a label, people can see the details that you see. So you kind of look at that blob. This is a skull, if you couldn't tell. But you kind of look at the brown blobs there, and it's really hard to tell what you're looking at. When you do those very simple sketches, that kind of pulls out the important things that the researcher wants the audience to be able to see. It works the same with, I didn't put a photo in here, but it also works with photography. Sometimes a photo just can't capture something. Sometimes it can. You can play with photos. But sometimes an illustration is what it takes to pull out the characters that the researcher needs the audience to see. So that's a very, very big, important part of research. Technical visualization is doing, that could be slideshows, that could be journals, that could be any kind of putting something out there that kind of says, this is the big picture of what we're looking at. And that's a very important area that really takes that blend of, you understand the research, but you also understand how to present that visually so that people understand it. Patents are a big one. When somebody applies for a patent, they need an illustration for it. So that is a lot of engineering. That's a lot of understanding. That's a lot of figuring out how the little different widgets go together. And that's like an unknown field that people don't know about, but doing illustrations for patents. Operating manuals. Anybody who's ever had to install a computer or install a faucet in their house, somebody's got to draw those pictures in those operating manuals. That might be just your kind of thing. Some people might want to go out there and draw dinosaurs. Other people might be very happy drawing all those very technical line drawings. Very legitimate field. And then engineering specs are another one. I used to work at Siemens Medical Systems a long time ago, and the way the engineering artists would draw the specs for like CAT scanners and X-ray equipment and things like that. It was just really amazing how they could just break the system apart and kind of do these blowouts and just show you how all the little parts went together. But those specs are what help the installers in the field figure out how to put things in these very, very complex systems. So if that appeals to you, that kind of, here's the researcher, here's the really hard science, and you want to visually represent that for people, that's a great field to go into. Another one is medicine and art. There is such a big need for medical illustration, partially because there have been so many advances in the field of medicine that they just really need people to be out there visualizing them. So we've got this adorable little boy, and you can see how they just used a really cool picture. They illustrated the little picture, and then they illustrated the bones in his hand. And just, again, it's that way of capturing people. You're not just drawing the bones in the hand. You found a way to catch somebody's attention and be like, why am I looking at this adorable little boy's hand? It's that visual piece and really engaging the audience. So that's something that artists, of course, really love to do. Surgical interventions. If you ever, I didn't want to put anything really gross up here, but when you're talking about surgery, there are all these illustrations. They're in the textbooks. They're in the, even if you look online, you can find them. But it just shows how all the organs work, how the surgery is going to work, what things are supposed to look like. I don't know if you've ever looked at, my sister-in-law is a surgeon, and I've looked at her textbook sometimes, and it's like, wow, it's hardcore. But there are drawings of pretty much anything that could happen to the human body, and somebody drew that. So if you're really into medicine and you're really into anatomy, biology, physiology, that kind of thing, that would be a fantastic field to go into. And then there are industry publications, and this is really similar to the research journals under the museum part of it. A lot of museums are research museums. So if you're just interested in doing kind of visualizations like that little, or it wasn't a dinosaur, but that little reptile skull, that's the kind of thing you can do for the human journals as well. And for the people who just really like taking that and making a visual representation of what people need to understand, it's a lot of fun. Another good one is computers in art. So if anybody ever has heard of the Imagineers and Disney Imagineering, they're the ones who create all the magic, as they like to say. You're thinking of Pixar, you're thinking of those kind of things, DreamWorks animation, but that is computers and art. And so this is really kind of this isn't really new. This is kind of a standard thing because doing digital art and doing animation is really, really old. But we're starting to get into things like 3D printing. We're starting to get into things like digital modeling. You know, they can 3D print entire buildings now. It's not just little fun things that you put on your desk. So that's just really a growing field. And that is another one of the biggest projected fields, is that 3D area, where it's taking either visualizing something so that it can be built, or actually doing the digital modeling and building it yourself. So if anybody's interested in this kind of thing, what kind of classes do you want to take? Again, this is interdisciplinary. So you're not just taking science, you're not just taking art. It's kind of a mix. You need that anatomy and physiology, whether you're interested in humans, plants, or animals, but you need to take those kind of courses so you can understand how things are built. Photography, not just for doing the work itself, but also for taking the reference photos. Drawing and painting and pen and ink, because even if you are a digital artist, it really helps to know how, you know, some people use the tablet and they use the pen on the digital tablet. So it's really good to have those fundamentals and those foundations of art, which are pretty much standard for any art student. Graphic design is important because you need to know how to put all these things together. If you're into the more computer side, then that's what that right column is. That's digital techniques, that 3D modeling. And then you always have these discipline-specific courses. So if you're interested in biological systems, if you're interested in medical conditions, if you're interested in filmmaking, if you want to go work with the Disney Imagineers, then you would want to work those in too. But it's always that interdisciplinary thing. You want an equal balance of the science and the art. Just kind of, again, if you like humans or plants or animals or dinosaurs or whatever it might be, then you want to kind of focus your electives on those kind of things. So another area that's really growing is technical writing. This is a book that I helped as a research person on, but it's anything that has to do with science that you're writing about. It's kind of obvious, but it is a skill. Technical writing is a skill because you do have to be very clear. Now, if you're writing about something like, I don't know, Game of Thrones, and you're writing about the science of dragons, that's cool too. But you really do need to have that grounding in the science and the writing. So you might want to do nature guides. That's talking about all the animals, identifying them, the localities where they are. That's a very big thing right now because people are very interested. It's a trend right now that people are actually interested in the world around them. So nature guides are actually growing. Educational materials, that could be for museums, that could be for schools, that could be for public programs, that could be for national parks. And then grants and fundraising. This is huge. Nobody ever has any money, especially nonprofits. And this is a very important skill. I actually had an intern who was working on grant writing with me over at the museum. I guess I should point that way, it's over there. But that's a very important skill, and it takes a lot of ability to interpret the science that you're trying to raise funds for the program or whatever it is for, and then actually get that written up in a way that makes your case, and it's, you know, convincing people that yes, we deserve to get your grant. Research and writing. Again, there's sort of like that public side, and then there's that interpreting the hard science side. This was an exhibit that we did at the Carnegie, part of our big Dinosaurs in Their Time exhibit. You can see that label rail where the boys are, and they're in front of the touch screen, but over on the right, there are some labels. So I wrote all of that. That was me. But taking that science, what the scientists are discovering and what they're researching and what's come out of it, and turning that into language that somebody can understand. It's not about just you know, taking what the scientists say and then put it on paper. Nobody can understand that. And there are different levels of writing too. You want to, especially in exhibit labels, you want to have like your main big idea that somebody can see just walking by and they don't even stop and read the label, but they can see the title. And then there's like a subsection that's sort of like, okay, if you care to slow down a little bit, here's the summary of what's going on in this label. And then all that other text is sort of, okay, if you're interested and you really want to know more, stay in here and you can read these other two paragraphs. But that's an actual skill too, figuring out how you chunk that information and target it toward the audience. Exhibit label writing is a very specific thing. And it just, it's really important to understand that the audience might just be walking through on their way to the gift shop, or they might actually be interested in what you have to say there at that exhibit. Scientific journals are another one. So again, just taking that information and being able to translate it so that it's digestible by someone who doesn't know the lingo and the language. And then translation. This is something I actually, when I worked at Siemens Medical Systems, I was a translator. And so you have to actually understand the research in a different language and then translate it into your target language. And so that's another skill too. So if any of you are interested in languages, if any of you are interested in that translation piece, that's a fantastic area. Siemens Medical Systems was a German company, and I was a German translator. So that just worked really well for me when I was first, breaking into the field. But it's a lot of fun because you get to figure out how you say something in one language that was in another, and completely in two different languages. It's an awesome job. So if anybody's into languages, that is a fantastic route. Another one is discoveries, and this can be anything. Like discoveries, it's programs, it's outreach, it's news and blogs and social. Here's one from the New York Times about the crab harvesting. I don't know if you know about the horseshoe crabs and them getting harvested and almost wiped out. So this is just a little story about that. But it's a huge thing. It's a huge field, obviously. And it's very respectable because it's something that they always need somebody who's willing to sit down and try and figure out the science again and make it understandable to the general public. Again, if anybody's interested in this, the kind of classes you want to take all the different kinds of writing you can, because you never know exactly what it is that you're going to have to say. Or what your audience is. And whenever I'm teaching people about this, I'm like, first question is always know your audience. Who is your audience? That's who you have to make sure you're writing toward. You want to take logic and you want to take analytics, because you have to be able to parse things. You have to be able to figure out what something means, where it goes, how it fits in, especially when you're doing like the hard science kind of stuff, the research. You have to really be able to figure it out. Graphic design and publishing are helpful because you're going to have to work with the designers or the layout people to make sure it fits. A lot of times people, they just start writing and they write, and then they find out, oh, I only had this much room, and they have to cut half of it. So it's really important to know something about graphic design and publishing, even though you might not be the one laying it out, you might not be the designer, but you really need to know how to work with them and speak their language to make sure that you're writing to the size that you need. And then again, there are always those discipline-specific courses. Whatever you're interested in, whether it's healthcare, biology, research methods, whatever it is, make sure your electives are going to start rounding out the major courses that you have to take in science and writing. So another really big thing, and this is really growing right now, is advocacy. So if you're interested in the humanities, if you're interested in social welfare, if you're interested in social change, this is a really great space to be in, because you're mixing that the social science part of things with going out and actually, changing the world. This is an example of an exhibit we worked on at my old museum. It was called Community Voices, and it was a public project that went out, and the ethnographers went out. They went out and interviewed people. They collected the data, in a qualitative research kind of way, if you know what that is. And then they synthesized all that, analyzed it, and they came back with their findings. They took photos of everybody, and then we put that all together in a rotating exhibit. So we would have a current event or some kind of current issue. We'd send the interviewers out. They would find a mix of people, ask them this question, do their qualitative research, bring it back, and then it would be in this gallery. And that would rotate a few times a year, just depending on a couple of different current issues. And it was a way to bring out those marginalized and underrepresented viewpoints. And making sure that everybody got heard, and everybody, their face and their name was associated with what they wanted to say. And you can kind of see the little cards beside the photos there on the left, and that was their answer to the question. So everybody got to be matched with what they were doing. But it was a fantastic project because it was a different kind of science too. It was qualitative research, and it was a different kind of, social research. And it was an advocacy piece. So for people who are interested in that kind of social interaction with science, advocacy is a fantastic way to do it. Really closely related to that is social change. This was a federally funded project I was involved with, and it united 4 big cities: Philadelphia, New York, Washington, DC, and Pittsburgh. And it was going into the inner city, going into the urban centers, and talking to people about climate change, because there's a really different perspective on climate change and the environment in general when you live in the city versus when you live in rural areas. And a lot of the stuff that we were discovering is that, people who live out in nature, people who live out in the woods, or at some point in their lives have been in suburban, at least, areas, they think butterflies are great. They think bugs are cool. But people who have grown up in the city and have never known anything else think all bugs are bad. So, all they've grown up with is like cockroaches and ants, and you squish those. So they see a butterfly and they think it's a bad bug. They think it's a moth that's going to eat their clothes. There's this educational piece where it's like you're trying to talk to people about climate change, but then you have to take a step back and realize they aren't even completely up to date on what the environment is outside of the city. So this was a federally funded project that got 4 different cities to go into the urban centers, do different types of research, and then combine forces and try to see if the things they used in their city would work in other cities, and just start disseminating that information. So again, it's that social piece, it's that social science, that social research, and how can you apply that with an actual very, very important scientific issue here, climate change, and affect people's behavior or influence them or impact them. So that's a really neat way to blend that humanities piece, if that's the kind of science that you're interested in, with another kind of advocacy and social impact outcome. And then the most obvious one is education. More than just being a science teacher in a classroom, this is more about engagement. And this is more about that. It's called informal learning. Anything you do in a classroom is considered formal education. That other 95% that you do for the rest of your life, whether you're in your own backyard or you go to a museum or a zoo, that's considered informal education. And that's kind of where this is coming in. That STEM engagement that NASA is behind is really trying to promote, again, that ecosystem of learning. It's not just about the 5% of your life that you spend in the classroom. What are the 95% of the rest of your time that you can do that's teaching you things, that's helping you learn things, that's helping you synthesize all the other things in your life and turning that into a STEAM outcome, so that you are understanding not just, oh, this is biology or this is chemistry, but how it fits in with what you're interested in, the arts, humanities, whatever it might be. So if that's something that interests you, the kind of things you want to take are really that, general studies kind of thing. You want to kind of do a little bit of everything, because that's what's going to help you understand, the world around you. You're looking at writing for communication. You're looking at world studies, history, philosophy, languages, because you're really just trying to understand the people around you. Ethics is very important. And then your discipline specific courses. Some people might want to go into, law. Some people might want to go into other things where that's where your electives come in. So again, there are those major courses you can take that kind of balance your STEM and your arts. But then those electives are where you're going to be able to come in and get some of that other stuff that's going to round you out. And so the last section is performing arts. And this is where we like to have fun with it, because this is like the fun stuff, dance, art, music. But music, dance, and art therapy are very important. And they're being, we were just talking about this earlier, we're kind of entering a time now where it's okay to say, I'm not okay, right? It's getting more acceptable to come out and say, I need help. We were just talking about that. And that's one of the reasons why this is really growing as a field. People really are seeing that they need to take better care of themselves mentally. And these kind of therapy sessions are really something that people are starting to turn to. Look at goat yoga, people are coming up with all kinds of things to kind of de-stress and just really take back their mental health. So this is really a growing field right now. If you're in performing arts, or if you're in that therapy space and that's something you want to blend it with, this is a great way to mix that kind of science with the performing arts, or that as we call it, kinesthetic learning. Kinesthetics, if you know, is movement. And this adorable little child is playing with a computer or a museum exhibit, but these pegs and exhibits kind of do different things. For this particular one, it was a music piece. And when you change the color things, you can make your own song, and then the other kids can dance along to it. And so it's kind of blending that science of learning, that science of music, with the actual practice of music. So there's always a little bit of science and a little bit of art kind of mixed together. And if you know anything about the different types of learning, there's a whole, unless you're education majors, you might not know, but people learn different ways. Some people like to feel things. Some people like to act out things. Some people like to draw. Some like to read. Everybody's got a different way that they learn best. And so that kinesthetic learning is one of those ways that you can kind of blend the science of learning with the movement and the art and the dance that you might like. And then, we got Bill Nye. We can't forget Bill Nye. There's that huge piece. If you are talented enough to be on TV and burning down globes, great. We've got Bill Nye, we've got Neil deGrasse Tyson, we got Dr. Raven, the science maven, who's pretty awesome. She's a microbiologist. But that's kind of a thing. I think you just basically have to have the talent. I didn't even say what classes to take because you're either that guy or you're not. But again, that's that performing arts piece where he gets to blend science with being Bill Nye the Science Guy. So for people who are interested in this, they might be wondering, what's next? Definitely talk to your professors or anybody else who's in your life about your interests. You really need to try to work those interdisciplinary courses into your schedule. Some places have that built in. They're really focusing on STEAM. They're really focusing on interdisciplinary things. Not every college is like that. Not every department is like that. So really you have to advocate for yourself. If you're interested in this kind of a STEAM career or blending this interdisciplinary approach, you really just need to talk to the people who can get you into these courses. We had one working over at the museum. We have students basically run the museum here, but we had one, she was an education major, and she did an entire project on a tour for early elementary kids. And that was part of her coursework. She did that as a project in her class. And because she worked at the museum, she knew that we got all these school groups in. She knew that we had these type of people in there. She could build this entire project around them and get credit for it. So that's not like it was a whole class that she took, but because she recognized, hey, here's somebody I can come in and do my little project with and get credit for it, that helped get her into her, she's really interested in museum education, and she was able to get that experience. I was able to write her a nice little reference for it. So even if it's not a whole course, see if there are ways that individual projects in your classes can somehow be applied in all these different areas if you're trying to blend that interdisciplinary piece. The importance of that is that learning options need to increase. Students now, especially this generation, are really demanding ownership of their experience. They're not coming in and saying, I'm going to do what you tell me. They're saying, this is what I want to do with my life, so help me get there. And that's really important. And schools and educators need to be responsive to that. So it's really important for you to speak up and say what it is you want. And again, we're kind of in a time now where it's okay to say, this is what I want. I know what I need. This is what's good for me. Let's get me there. So make sure you're advocating for yourself. Experience. You'll hear this. I know you've heard this, but look for internships, look for volunteer activities, because that's really going to give you a sense of the field that you want to get into. We've had people, again, just because I'm over at the museum, but we've had people come in and they find out, they would like, oh, I'd love to give tours. I'd love to do that kind of thing. They give like 2 tours to a bunch of screaming third graders. That's it. They're done. They tap out. And they're like, no, I don't want to do this. It really is important to, if you can, to try and get a little experience in that field. Again, 95% of your learning occurs outside the classroom. Those experiences don't have to happen in the classroom. Make sure you're looking for things around you where you can get out there and be like, okay, I'm interested in nature education. Let me see if I can get it in a nature center. I'm interested in medical illustration. Let me see if I can get in, volunteering at a hospital or something, or doing some kind of marketing for whatever it might be. But always be looking for that. And again, just pushing for yourself what it is you want. And then find a mentor. Mentors are very important. There's a ton of research out there about people who have mentors just overall succeed better in life because they've got someone they can turn to kind of walk them through, is this, what am I looking at? Is this normal? What's a normal path? What should I be doing here? And just kind of guiding them through, somebody who's been there and done that. Research actually shows that when you have that personalized engagement, when you have that one-on-one with, it doesn't have to be a professor, it could be someone who's out in the field, it could just be someone in your life, but people who have that individualized mentor relationship overall, not just graduating college, but doing better in life. And there's a lot of research out there about that. So I just kind of put like a little brain dump word cloud up there of all the different things that can be put together. You got the little plus in the middle. Really, you can mix and match anything you want, and it's going to come out and be a STEAM career. But the big thing is to make sure that you're advocating for yourself and make sure that, again, with that ecosystem of learning, always be looking at the influences that aren't just in the classroom, but all the things in your life that are kind of shaping and forming who you want to be when you get out of college and move on with your life.